These hive cards that you see on the front of these hives here, we use to keep up with different info through the year on the hive itself, or mainly the queen that's in that hive. We use it for choosing queens when we're picking out breeders to graft from, and they make it easy to write and keep your notes with. You can use the top, but the top a lot of times is hard to write on, especially as they age and in the morning times when they're wet. That it's really difficult to write on them. Those cards you can just wipe the water right off and write on them, and it's easy to do. And they stay with that queen, that brood box. We use single brood boxes, and this is a separate hive on top right now, but if this moves off or the top gets misplaced onto another hive during inspections or something, we don't have to worry about that because we have the card attached to that brood box, and that brood box won't move. If we pull the queen out in a split or something, move her somewhere else, that card will go with it. So we don't have to worry about getting those notes mixed up. That'll stay right with that queen. I used to use these cards here that had pre-filled slots already for different things I wanted to note and grade, place on the bottom for notes, but I don't use most of that stuff and needed more room for just writing random notes. So I went to just blank cards. You order these off Amazon. It's just ID badges is what it is. A thick plastic ID badge made for printing IDs on your own. Pretty cheap on Amazon. Just drill a hole right in the top like this one's got, and use a push pin to push it right in the front of the hive. Also use a garden marker. That's what I found that works best. Sharpie fades away over time, but these order these off Amazon also. There's different kinds. This kind I use. It's made for marking those plant markers, little white markers you stick down in the potted plants. Got a little point on the end of it. You mark those with this, and it lasts really good. So that's the best thing I found to mark plastic with. It stays out in the weather. Other folks use grading systems that I don't really like that approach. They'll take a lot of different categories for each hive and give a grade for that category. Say it be laying pattern, be brood counts, mite counts, honey produced, things like that. I grade for those things, but I don't use a grading system. I don't mark every characteristic for every hive. I think that's a little bit elaborate, and that gets tedious and probably winds up not being as accurate. As I go through hives, I don't mark every single characteristic. I just mark the things that stand out. If there's a really good characteristic I find, a really low mite, I mark the mites on all of them, but any kind of say laying pattern, whether it be good or bad, I mark that. Anything that's average, I don't worry with that. Anything that's fairly normal, I don't worry about that. I mark the really good standout characteristics, and also the bad things that stand out. I mark those. Any kind of, when I'm grading queens, I pick from the best of those characteristics is marked, and any kind of negative mark that queen has will rule her out when I'm judging for queens. So the most important things that we note on there is early in the spring I mark the frame count. That's what I start with. In February, when we first start coming out of winter and feeding bees and checking these hives out, I'll tilt back the brood box and count the frames of bees in every hive, and I mark that down. And we'll do that every 2 weeks through the early part of the spring. And that's my first judgment. I like to pick those queens first. That's as my first characteristic, the ones that has the biggest frame count coming out, because I know that's the first indicator to show me a good queen, a productive queen, that she's not dealt with mite problems, and she's laid good and been able to keep a good overwintered brood nest. So that's the first consideration is frame count. Also, that'll allow you to pick out, as the spring goes through, picks out any kind of queens that's underperforming. The brood nest is not growing, or a failing queen that starts to decrease at that time of year. That shouldn't be happening. If you find that, those notes will let you know right away that there's a problem, and go ahead and do something with that hive. Pull them out, or combine them with something else, or requeen them, whatever your choice is. I use these cards to keep up with the age. There'll be a year for that queen marked on every card, so I know when she's aged out, when it's time to requeen. And it's also a judgment for me. I like to pick breeders from older queens because I know that they have done well over time and haven't swarmed. We take our mite counts. We do a mite count in the early spring. We do a mite count in the fall. I will keep up with those on these cards also for every single hive. We'll write down a mite count. That way I pick from my lowest mite counts. That's one of my considerations. And anything that's got anything less than extraordinary for a mite count, anything that's not extraordinarily low, I will rule that out. I will pick queens that has no mites or very, very little mites. That is the mite count and frame count is my number one judgments when picking queens. I'll also write down in the fall, in the summertime when we pull honey, I'll write down the amount of honey, the boxes of honey that each hive has made. That's also a consideration. I'll do that for every hive. For temperament, I'll write those things down. I don't do it for every hive. I just, when I come across a hive that's mean, I'll mark that they're hot or they're mean. I'll mark that down. If I open up one, I've been going through hives through the day and kind of get a feel for the way the bees are, and all of a sudden I'll open up one that's just really gentle. I'll mark that down also and use those as a part of my grading of queens. Anytime I see a issue with a brood pattern, if it don't look really good, I'll mark a bad brood pattern, a spotty brood pattern, anything that don't look good, I'll mark that and use that to rule queens out. If I find a queen that's got just a wide brood pattern, maybe wall to wall of really solid frames of brood, if I find something that just looks exceptionally good, I'll mark that as a really good laying queen on that card. I'll mark that down and use that as a judgment. One thing that I have started to do recently is mark propolis. So they'll all have some propolis in the fall, but if I open up a hive and there's above average, maybe not an extraordinary amount of propolis, but above average propolis in the hive, I will mark that. That's one thing I'm kind of trying to work into our stock. There's been a lot of recent research that I've read and watched that's proven the qualities, the benefits of bees that use a good amount of propolis, and I believe it, and I want to incorporate more of that into our genetics. But also I use, instead of the pre-filled cards with the characteristics or grading system already on it, I'm going to the just blank cards. That leaves me a lot more room for notes. There's a lot of times that we'll need notes through the year. Maybe when a hive was requeened, maybe when we add a cell into a hive that we found queenless. Notes like that you'll need to write down. So I use those for all those notes also. So in our grading system, when I come around and get ready to grade out queens, to pick queens to move to my grafting yard, I will consider every hive. I'll go look at the grades and the marks for every hive. Number one, I start with the frame counts, and I will look at the frame counts from the first couple of of inspections that we've done in February, and primarily the very first inspection. That's the #1 indicator. I'll start with those queens that have the well above average frame counts, frames of bees. I'll start with that, and that's, like I said, that's a great indicator of overall health and production of a queen. She's obviously not had any mite problems, and she's just done overwintered a good nest. She's done really well, because she's got a standout amount of bees in her brood nest. That's indicator #1. That's my first grade. I'll start with those hives that has a high frame count. #2, I will go from those queens that I have picked out with the highest frame count. I will go through those queens. Everything else has been eliminated. I go through the queens that I picked out from frame counts, and I will pick from them. I will pick the lowest mite counts and eliminate the rest. And that's my top 2 qualities. The next thing that I will consider from those queens that are left is the age. That is another really good factor for me. I want queens that have proven themselves over time to last, to deal with mite problems over time, to deal with any kind of issues they've been faced. They've proven themselves over time. I want a queen that's not last year's queen. If they're going in their 2nd year, that's a good indicator for me that that's a great queen. I will take what we've eliminated, what we have left after eliminations from frame count, mite counts, what's left of that. I'll consider age on those queens, and those are my standout queens. And I will pick the best of those to graft from. And there are some other considerations that I'll consider from the other notes that we've had on those cards. The top 2 mainly for honey production and temperament. I'll consider those notes also. But that's how we grade our queens through the year and pick out our queens to breed from. I thank you for watching this video. I'm Brad Kelly with Chilton Bee Company. Subscribe to our channel. Hit the bell icon at the bottom. Turn on the notifications to be notified of any videos we got coming out. Thank you for watching.